Commander Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the human diplomatic ship, watching the massive space station called the Galactic HFY grow larger as they approached. The station was a sprawling structure of metal and crystal, built by species that had mastered interstellar travel thousands of years before humans even left their own solar system. Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This was humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Council, and everything depended on making a good impression. He was a tall man with dark hair and steady eyes that had seen combat in Earth's conflicts. He wore a formal diplomatic uniform instead of his military gear, though part of him wished he could face this challenge in his regular clothes. Around him, the other human delegates moved nervously, preparing themselves for the meeting. Maya Shun, a brilliant young scientist, studied the reports on her tablet, her mind already calculating possibilities and dangers. The Galactic HFY was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It housed representatives from 70 different intelligent species, all living together in relative peace. The achievement was remarkable, but Jake knew that not all the council members welcomed humanity's arrival. Some species saw humans as barbarians, too young and too violent to be trusted with advanced knowledge. Others viewed Earth as a planet of limited resources that could be exploited for profit. When the human delegation entered the Grand Council chamber, the first thing Jake noticed was the silence. The room was enormous, with raised platforms holding representatives from different species. Some were humanoid, standing on two legs and breathing the same air as humans. Others floated in specialized chambers filled with different gases. Some were entirely alien, their biology so different that Jake could barely comprehend their forms. The leader of the council was an ancient being called Crasix, a Valorian who had lived for over 3,000 years. The Valorians were known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy, though they rarely needed to fight anymore. Crasix looked at the human delegation with eyes that seemed to see through them, measuring and judging. He spoke in the universal translanguage that all council members used, his voice deep and commanding. "The human species," Crasix began, his tone suggesting he was discussing a curiosity rather than a potential ally. "We've reviewed your development over the past century. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. Your civilization is fractured by endless conflicts. Your leaders make decisions based on emotion rather than logic." Jake felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. He had trained for this moment, prepared for insults and dismissals. The other council members murmured among themselves, some agreeing with Crasix's assessment. A Zorvathan representative, a tall being with tentacles instead of arms, gestured in a way that clearly showed contempt. Over the next several hours, the council subjected humanity to a formal assessment. They asked questions about human capabilities, human technology, and human reliability. Whenever the human delegation answered with pride about their achievements, the council responded with explanations of why those same achievements were trivial compared to established galactic standards. Humans had mastered nuclear energy. The galaxy had harnessed the power of stars directly. Humans had created artificial intelligence. The galaxy had been using advanced synthetic intelligence for millennia. The final blow came when the Council announced humanity's official status in galactic society. Humans would be classified as a developing species, suitable only for trade agreements involving basic resources and low-technology manufacturing. They would have access to certain restricted zones only with special permission. Military participation was completely forbidden. Humanity would not be allowed to purchase advanced weapons or defensive systems. Jake listened to the announcement with controlled fury. Earth, with all its brilliant scientists and strong military forces, had been relegated to the status of a resource colony. The Council saw no potential in humanity. They saw only weakness and primitive thinking. The journey back to Earth was long and quiet. Maya-chan spent most of the time in the data center, analyzing information the council had provided. She was searching through astronomical observations and deep space scans when she found something that made her stop. Her hands trembled as she called Jake to her station. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Look at these energy signatures. They are coming from beyond the galactic boundary." Jake studied the data, his military training helping him understand what he was seeing. The signatures indicated movement, organization, and power. Someone or something was gathering forces beyond the known galactic region. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know exactly," Maya replied. "But whatever it is advanced, it is organized, and it is moving toward known space. And Commander, based on trajectory projections, it will reach the galactic boundary within 2 years." Jake immediately contacted the Galactic Council with this information. He sent them the data, the projections, everything Maya had discovered. The response came back within hours. The Council reviewed the information and dismissed it. Their advanced sensor systems had not detected anything unusual. They assured Jake that the human analysis was flawed, that primitive human instruments often produced false readings. There was no threat coming toward galactic space. The Council would not be placing any defensive forces or mobilizing any response to a phantom danger. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He went to the military leadership of Earth's primary power block and proposed something radical. He wanted to train a small unit of the best soldiers Earth had to offer, soldiers who could think creatively, adapt quickly, and face overwhelming odds without breaking. They would not be part of the military establishment. They would not be on any official registry. They would simply exist, preparing for a threat that the rest of the galaxy was too arrogant to acknowledge. The military leadership agreed. Within months, Jake had selected 50 of Earth's finest soldiers. Among them was Ryan Cooper, a sergeant with 12 years of combat experience and a mind that never stopped strategizing. There was Lisa Park, an officer whose courage was matched only by her tactical brilliance. There was Marcus Lee, an explosive specialist who could improvise solutions from almost nothing. And there were others, each one the best at what they did. Each one selected for their ability to adapt and survive. Jake Morrison began training them in secret, teaching them not just how to fight, but how to think like their enemies, how to find weakness in superior forces, how to turn enemy strength into enemy weakness. He taught them that humanity's greatest advantage was not bigger muscles or faster technology. It was imagination, creativity, and the refusal to accept defeat. As the months passed and Jake's special unit trained in the hidden facilities beneath Earth, the galaxy continued on, unaware that one young species was preparing for something no one else believed was coming. The Galactic Council remained convinced of their own superiority and safety. The ancient species continued their peaceful existence, secure in their power and their knowledge. But Jake Morrison knew something they did not. Something dangerous was moving through the darkness between stars. And when it arrived, the galaxy would learn what humanity truly was. The galaxy had dismissed humans as weak, primitive, and insignificant. But they had never truly tested them, never pushed them to the edge of survival. Jake Morrison intended to make sure they would never make that mistake again. The distress call came through the Galactic Communication Network on a quiet morning in Earth's time zone. A trading station called Outpost Delta, located on the neutral border between established galactic territory and the unexplored zones, had been attacked without warning. The enemy force was unlike anything the Council had encountered before. They moved with military precision, used advanced weaponry, and showed no interest in negotiation or surrender terms. They simply destroyed everything in their path. The Galactic Council went into emergency session. Representatives from all 70 species called for immediate military response. The unknown enemy, which they named the Vex after analyzing communication fragments, was unlike any threat the galaxy had faced in recorded history. The Vex seemed organized, aggressive, and determined to expand their territory through conquest rather than diplomacy. In the council chamber, Krasix the Valorian stood and made a statement that surprised many members. The Valorians would lead the military response, as they had done countless times throughout history. But, Krasix said, his voice carrying a note of reluctant acceptance, they would require support from other species. The council needed to mobilize a fighting force larger than anything assembled in the past 500 years. Commander Jake Morrison was in the observation gallery when the call came to the human ship. The Galactic Council was requesting military assistance from humanity. The request was formal and official, transmitted directly to Earth government. Humanity was being asked to contribute soldiers to help defend galactic civilization. Jake's first reaction was bitter amusement. The same council that had forbidden humanity from possessing military capabilities was now begging for human soldiers. But he quickly set aside the satisfaction of vindication. This was what he had been training for. This was the moment that would define whether his vision of human potential would survive or become a forgotten dream. He contacted Ryan Cooper immediately. The sergeant was in Training Complex 7 when Jake found him, running his unit through a combat simulation. When Jake entered the room, Ryan knew immediately that something had changed. The commander's expression told him everything. Within 12 hours, 50 human soldiers were aboard a military transport heading toward the neutral border. They were equipped with the best technology Earth could provide, upgraded with some limited advancements they had acquired through the Council's authorized trade channels. It was not much compared to established galactic military standards, but the soldiers carrying those weapons knew them perfectly. They had trained with them, adapted them, and learned to maximize every tactical advantage those systems offered. The Valorian military base was impressive in scale and organization. Thousands of soldiers moved through its corridors with practiced efficiency. The human unit arrived and was immediately directed to a secondary command post. A Valorian general named Styx reviewed the human soldiers with obvious skepticism. These small, fragile beings with their primitive armor seemed almost ridiculous, standing next to Valorian soldiers who were larger, stronger, and equipped with weapons that could level buildings. But Jake noticed something in Styx's eyes. There was curiosity there, mixed with doubt. The general had agreed to let humanity participate in the coming battle. Jake knew this was their chance. One success, one moment where human thinking and strategy made a difference, could change the galaxy's entire perception of humanity. The first battle came 3 days later. A mining facility on an asteroid was under attack by Vex forces. The Valorian strategy was straightforward and direct. They would approach the facility from the primary approach route, using overwhelming firepower to destroy the Vex defenders. They would lose some soldiers, but they would win the battle through superior force. Jake Morrison recommended a different approach. Instead of attacking from the primary route, human soldiers could take a secondary path that the Vex likely considered too dangerous. They could approach from the facility's rear, draw Vex attention from that direction, and force the Vex command structure to split their forces. Once the enemy was divided, the Valorian forces could attack the weakened positions and achieve victory with minimal casualties. Styx listened to Jake's proposal and rejected it without hesitation. The Valorian way had worked for 3,000 years. It would work again. He ordered the direct assault to begin. The battle started with Valorian soldiers charging toward the facility from the primary approach. Their weapons fired with tremendous power, destroying Vex defensive positions and overwhelming initial resistance. For the first few minutes, it seemed the direct approach would work. But then the Vex revealed their true strategy. They had positioned their strongest units in hidden bunkers along the primary approach route. As the Valorian advance progressed, those units emerged and began devastating counterattack. Valorian soldiers fell in enormous numbers. The advance slowed, then stopped completely. Styx realized his strategy was failing, but he had no backup plan. The battle was turning into a grinding war of attrition. Jake Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He took his human unit and executed the flanking maneuver he had originally proposed, even though he had not received permission. The 50 human soldiers moved through terrain that the Vex considered impassable, using small unit tactics and careful positioning. They reached the facility's rear section and attacked with precision and coordination. The Vex, suddenly assaulted from an unexpected direction, panicked. They had been so focused on the primary battle that they had left their rear defenses undermanned. The human soldiers, fighting with discipline and tactical awareness, overwhelmed the Vex positions and worked their way toward the facility's command center. Ryan Cooper led a squad directly toward the enemy command position. His soldiers used cover effectively, moved with purpose, and fired with accuracy. The Vex troops found themselves not just under attack, but under attack from an enemy that seemed to anticipate their movements and counter their strategies. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. The human assault broke through to the command center. In a series of decisive actions, Ryan and his squad eliminated the Vex command structure. Without leadership, the Vex forces in the facility began to lose coordination. The Valorian soldiers, finally seeing an opportunity, launched another assault from the primary position and pushed through the now weakened enemy defenses. The Vex withdrew from the facility, leaving the area in human and Valorian hands. The battle was over. Humanity had won its first combat engagement against an alien enemy. Styx approached Jake Morrison with an expression that mixed anger with something else, something that looked remarkably like respect. The Valorian general had been proven wrong, and a Valorian always acknowledged truth when it presented itself. He told Jake that his soldiers had fought with unexpected skill and tactical brilliance. The general requested that the human unit remain with the Valorian forces for the next scheduled engagement. Jake agreed, but he made one request. He asked that his soldiers be allowed to implement their own tactical approaches rather than simply follow Valorian orders. If they were to be effective allies, they needed to be allowed to fight as humans fought, thinking as humans thought. Styx agreed. He had seen the results of human thinking, and he was intelligent enough to recognize genius when it defeated him. From that day forward, human soldiers fought alongside Valorian warriors not as subordinates, but as partners. And everywhere they fought, the results were the same. The Vex were pushed back. The threat was contained. And the galaxy began to whisper about this young human species that seemed to possess something more valuable than weapons or power. They possessed adaptability, creativity, and courage that surpassed anything the ancient civilizations had maintained. News traveled through galactic civilization at the speed of light itself, and what it carried was the story of humanity's unexpected military genius. The mining facility victory would have been forgotten if it had remained isolated, but it did not. Over the following months, human soldiers participated in operation after operation. Each time, they brought something different to the battlefield. Each time, they found ways to win that other species had never considered. Vex forces that had defeated established military units fell to human soldiers with less technology and fewer numbers. Maya Chun left her scientific research and joined Commander Jake Morrison's growing military organization. She became the strategic advisor, analyzing Vex movements and predicting their intentions. Her brilliant mind, combined with her deep understanding of scientific principles, allowed her to spot patterns that military personnel alone might miss. She could predict where the Vex would attack next based on resource locations and supply line analysis. She could determine enemy troop movements by studying their logistics. The Galactic Council began to recognize humanity not as a developing species in need of protection, but as a vital military asset. They started providing human soldiers with access to better technology. The humans adapted these technologies quickly, not just learning how to use them, but improving them through creative modifications. They combined human fighting tactics with alien weapon systems, creating hybrid approaches that were more effective than either alone. A particular group of human soldiers became famous across the galaxy. Marcus Lee, the explosive specialist, became legendary for his ability to turn any available materials into weapons and defensive systems. In one famous battle, Marcus and his team used salvaged Vex technology combined with Earth materials to create an improvised shield generator that protected an entire city from orbital bombardment. The feat seemed impossible, according to established physics. But Marcus had simply refused to accept that something was impossible when survival demanded it be accomplished. Kate Anderson, the communications officer who had learned 5 alien languages, began adding more to her repertoire. She became fluent in 12 different languages and dialect variations. More importantly, she learned to negotiate with alien species, not just translate their words, but understand their cultures and their ways of thinking. She prevented several conflicts from escalating into wars by serving as an intermediary between different species who had misunderstood each other. David Torres, the medical officer, found himself operating in conditions no Earth doctor had ever trained for. He worked with alien biology, learned to treat injuries that had no human equivalent, and developed new medical techniques using advanced technology combined with basic principles of human medicine. His patients included soldiers from 20 different species, and his reputation for saving lives spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had never worked with humans before requested him specifically for their military medical teams. The Vex threat continued to expand, but now they faced organized resistance. The Galactic Council created a unified military command structure with human soldiers at its core. Jake Morrison was promoted and given authority over military strategy. At first, the other military leaders from established species resented taking orders from a human, but the results spoke clearly. Under Morrison's leadership, the Vex were pushed back consistently. Every month, the human-led forces reclaimed territory that had been lost. More young humans began volunteering for the military effort. News of human achievements spread back to Earth, and the recruitment was voluntary. These were not young people without options who had joined out of desperation. These were people who chose to be part of something larger than themselves, to be part of a mission that transcended Earth and human civilization itself. They were fighting to protect not just their own species, but to safeguard the peace of an entire galaxy. The reputation of humanity grew in unexpected ways. Young members of other alien species began requesting permission to train with human soldiers. A Valorian named Keth, grandson of General Styx, enrolled in the human military academy that Jake Morrison established. The academy taught human tactical thinking, but it also taught something more fundamental. The idea that victory came not from physical superiority, but from superior thinking and moral courage. The Zorvathans, who had shown contempt for humanity in the early council sessions, sent their own soldiers to train with human forces. They found that humans approached problems differently than they did. Where Zorvathans relied on their natural tentacle strength and coordinated group thinking, humans taught them to use individual initiative and creative planning. The combination made Zorvathan soldiers more effective than they had ever been, even some Krasik's own people. The Valorians admitted privately that human military thinking was superior to Valorian tactical doctrine. The admission was shocking. Valorians had led the galaxy's military forces for thousands of years. The idea that a young species could teach them anything was revolutionary. Jake, Morrison established 4 bases not just for military purposes, but for cultural exchange. Human soldiers lived alongside alien soldiers, teaching and learning from each other. Through these close interactions, mutual respect developed. Barriers broke down. Species that had considered humans primitive began to understand that primitiveness was relative. Humans were simply at a different stage of development, not an inferior stage, just a different one. Battles continued, and humans were in the center of each one. Ryan Cooper, now a full commander of his own unit, became famous for leading strikes against Vex command structures. His soldiers would identify the enemy leadership positions, plan surgical strikes with minimal collateral damage, and eliminate threats before they could expand. He fought not just to win battles, but to minimize casualties on all sides. A philosophy that spread through the human military forces. The turning point came when a Vex assault fleet approached a civilian space station that held 6 million inhabitants from different species. The Council's military leaders said the station was lost. They recommended immediate evacuation. The defensive forces were insufficient. The station could not be held. Jake Morrison looked at the data and saw something different. He saw a Vex strategy that was predictable. He saw an enemy that had become overconfident. He gathered his best soldiers and his brightest strategists and proposed that they could hold the station. But they would need to fight in a way that no established military force would accept. They would need to take risks. They would need to trust in human ingenuity and adaptability. The Council's leaders were skeptical, but they had learned to trust Jake Morrison's judgment. They authorized the operation. Within hours, human soldiers were in position on the station, working with the local defense forces to prepare for the Vex assault. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The Vex attacked with overwhelming force, but the humans had prepared the battlefield in ways the Vex did not anticipate. They had created defensive positions that used the station's architecture in unexpected ways. They had predicted the Vex assault patterns and built defenses specifically designed to counter those patterns. Ryan Cooper personally led the most dangerous positions, moving through the station's corridors and coordinating the defense. Marcus Lee and his demolition teams rigged the station systems to create defensive barriers from its own structure. Kate Anderson transmitted constant updates between human soldiers and local defense forces, keeping everyone coordinated and informed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Vex had been repulsed and the 6 million civilians had been saved. Not a single civilian died. The human cost was 37 soldiers killed and over 100 wounded, but the victory was absolute. News of the station defense spread like fire through galactic civilization. In every bar, in every military headquarters, in every government council chamber, the story was told. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had not just survived impossible odds. They had saved an entire population of 6 million from certain death. The Vex leadership had been watching humanity's victories with increasing alarm. Every battle brought the same result. Vex forces, superior in numbers and technology, were defeated by human tactics and human courage. The Vex commanders realized that humanity was becoming the greatest threat to their expansion. If they did not eliminate the human military threat, their entire invasion of galactic space would fail. The Vex called together their war council and made a strategic decision. They would not continue fighting scattered battles against human-led forces across multiple star systems. Instead, they would commit their entire available force to a single massive assault. They would discover where humanity's military training facility was located, and they would destroy it completely. If they could eliminate the core of human military leadership and destroy the source of human tactical innovation, they could break the back of galactic resistance. That it took the Vex intelligence services 3 months to locate the human training facility. It was hidden in a remote sector, built into an asteroid field that made approach difficult and detection easy. But the Vex were persistent. They gathered intelligence from ships that had been captured or destroyed. They analyzed battle records and identified patterns. Eventually, they found it. The attack came without warning. Vex forces emerged from faster-than-light travel in overwhelming numbers. Jake Morrison had approximately 4,000 human soldiers in the facility, most of them in the middle of their training cycles. He also had 5,000 soldiers from allied species who were undergoing advanced human-taught combat programs. Against them came a Vex fleet with 20,000 soldiers and military superiority in every category. When the alarm sounded, Jake Morrison made a decision that would define his leadership forever. He could evacuate. The facility had fast transport vessels. He could save most of the personnel. But if he evacuated, the Vex would gain a tremendous propaganda victory. The great human military force would have run from battle. More importantly, there were civilians in the facility. Scientists, support personnel, and the families of many soldiers. Jake Morrison made the choice to stand and fight. He gathered Ryan Cooper, Marcus Lee, and his other senior commanders. He told them the situation plainly. The Vex force was larger, better equipped, and had superior numbers. By every logical measure, they could not win. But they did not need to win in the traditional sense. They only needed to hold long enough for the civilians to evacuate and for reinforcements to arrive from allied forces in nearby systems. Ryan Cooper volunteered to lead the rear defensive position, the place where the fighting would be most desperate. He knew his position would likely be overrun. He accepted this with the calm resolve that had made him legendary. His job was to hold long enough for others to survive. The Vex assault began with orbital bombardment. Vex ships rained weapons fire on the asteroid facility, trying to destroy it from above. But Jake Morrison had positioned the human forces carefully. They used the asteroid's natural rock formations and the facility's own structure as cover. Human soldiers, trained in adapting to any environment, positioned themselves in locations the Vex had not anticipated. They created defensive networks that used the very destruction the Vex was causing, turning the asteroid's caves and crevices into natural fortifications. When Vex troops landed, they found themselves not in an easy slaughter, but in brutal close-quarter combat. Human soldiers fought with discipline and desperation. They fought knowing that civilians depended on them. They fought knowing that the entire future of human-galactic relations rested on their refusal to break. Marcus Lee and his demolition teams did something remarkable. As the asteroid was being destroyed by Vex bombardment, Marcus used the destruction to his advantage. He rigged failing sections of the asteroid to collapse at precisely the right moments, creating barriers between Vex positions and human defenders. He transformed the facility itself into a weapon. Ryan Cooper's position became the focal point of the battle. Vex forces threw everything at his defensive line, trying to punch through and access the evacuation zone. Wave after wave of Vex soldiers attacked. Human defenders fell, but the line held. Ryan moved through the battle with perfect awareness, repositioning soldiers, directing fire, and when necessary, fighting personally to prevent breaches. At one point, a massive Vex assault pushed through the defensive line's left flank. Vex soldiers were about to reach the evacuation point when Ryan Cooper led a counterattack that seemed suicidal. He ran directly at the Vex advance with 24 soldiers behind him. They fought like possessed beings, hitting the Vex with such ferocity and coordination that the aliens fell back. Ryan took a severe wound, but he kept fighting. He was struck again and again, but he refused to fall. His soldiers watched their commander fight through pain that should have killed him, and they found strength they did not know they possessed. The battle raged for 8 hours. 8 hours of continuous fighting without reinforcement, without relief, without hope of traditional victory. But Maya Chun had sent distress calls to allied forces. The Valorian military command was mobilizing. The Zorvathans had diverted their fleet toward the facility. The Krasik's council members, moved by the human refusal to surrender, had authorized immediate military support. When the first Allied reinforcement force arrived, it came as sudden salvation. Valorian warships emerged and began attacking the Vex fleet from the space above. The Vex assault, which had been focused entirely on the ground facility, suddenly found itself under attack from above. Vex command structure fragmented. Some forces were recalled to defend the fleet. The pressure on the human defenders decreased, but Jake Morrison did not order a retreat. Instead, he authorized an offensive. With Valorian support, human soldiers shifted from defensive to offensive operations. They moved against the wounded Vex force, pushing outward from the asteroid facility. The Vex, expecting resistance only, found themselves facing counterattack. The momentum shifted. The Vex began withdrawing, but Jake Morrison made a decision that shocked everyone observing the battle. He ordered his soldiers not to pursue with maximum lethality. Instead, he demanded that Vex soldiers be given the opportunity to surrender. He wanted prisoners, not dead enemies. He wanted to demonstrate that humanity fought for survival and protection, not for conquest or vengeance. Some Vex soldiers accepted the surrender. Others fought to the death. But Jake Morrison's order ensured that the Vex forces had a choice, that they could choose to live rather than be forced to die in battle. When the battle ended, the human military facility had been severely damaged but not destroyed. More importantly, the human soldiers had held against overwhelming odds. They had proven that numerical superiority and technological advantage meant nothing if the defending force possessed superior tactics and unwavering courage. Ryan Cooper was carried from the battle severely wounded but alive. Medical teams, working with David Torres' emergency protocols, worked through the night to save his life. He had taken 11 serious wounds and should have died 10 times over. But human resilience, combined with advanced medical technology, kept him alive. The Vex assault fleet retreated, damaged and demoralized. They reported back to their leadership that attacking the human facility had been a disaster. They had thrown an enormous force at a smaller enemy and been repelled. The psychological impact was devastating. The Vex realized that they could not simply overwhelm humanity through force. They would need a different strategy entirely. 6 months after the failed Vex assault on the human facility, the Galactic Council convened in an emergency session that would reshape galactic politics forever. The chamber was full of representatives from all 70 species, and the atmosphere was different from any previous council meeting. Where once there had been condescension toward humanity, there was now respect, even something approaching reverence. Kras 6, the ancient Valorian, stood and spoke to the assembly. He acknowledged what the entire galaxy now understood. Humanity was not a primitive species requiring guidance. Humanity was the most effective military force galactic civilization possessed. The Valorians, who had led the galaxy's defense for 3,000 years, could not match human tactical brilliance. The Council could no longer afford to treat humans as subordinates or developing species requiring protection. The Council voted to create a new position within galactic governance, the Galactic Protectorate. This was a permanent military command structure led by the species most suited to the role. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would hold this position. Commander Jake Morrison was formally appointed as the first protector of the galaxy, answerable only to the full council and given authority over all military operations within galactic space. Jake Morrison attended the council session, and when he stood to accept the honor, he did something that shocked the entire assembly. He refused to take command of the military structure as a human leader advancing human interests. Instead, he made a statement that would be remembered and quoted. throughout galactic civilization for thousands of years. He said that humanity did not want domination over other species. They did not seek to replace Valorian leadership with human leadership. What humanity offered was service. Humans would defend the galaxy, not out of desire for power, but because defending the innocent was the right thing to do. Humans would share their tactical knowledge with all species willing to learn. Humans would stand in the forefront of danger so that other civilizations could live in safety. Jake Morrison requested that he be allowed to step down from active military command. Instead, he wanted to establish a framework for human galactic cooperation that would ensure no single individual, human or otherwise, could accumulate excessive power. He recommended Ryan Cooper, now recovered from his wounds though permanently scarred, as the next military commander. Ryan was more suited to the day-to-day operations of the Protectorate. Jake would serve as an advisor and strategist, guiding without controlling. The Council accepted his recommendation. Ryan Cooper, the sergeant who had held desperate defensive positions against overwhelming odds, became the military commander of the galaxy's combined forces. His appointment brought tears to the eyes of many council members. They understood that this young human species was offering something more valuable than weapons or tactics. They were offering integrity, honor, and a commitment to protecting others without demanding power in return. Maya Chen was appointed as Chief Strategic Advisor to the Galactic Council. Her brilliant analysis had predicted enemy movements and identified diplomatic solutions that prevented several conflicts from escalating into full-scale wars. She worked with council members from every species to integrate human strategic thinking into galactic governance. Kate Anderson became the ambassador of human relations, responsible for ongoing communication and cultural exchange with every galactic species. She used her linguistic skills and deep understanding of alien cultures to build bridges between species that had previously maintained only formal relationships. Under her guidance, human soldiers trained alongside Valorians, Zorvathans, Krasiks, and dozens of other species. The training facilities, once exclusively human, became centers of interspecies cooperation. Marcus Lee established the Innovation Institute, a research facility where humans and aliens collaborated to develop new technologies by combining human creativity with alien scientific advancement. The Institute produced weapon systems, defensive technologies, and medical breakthroughs. But more importantly, it produced mutual understanding. Species learned to value human thinking processes and human approaches to problem solving. David Torres founded the Galactic Medical Corps, training medical professionals from every species in human emergency medicine and advanced surgical techniques. His methods, developed in the harsh battlefields where human soldiers fought, proved applicable to alien biology as well. Species that had considered humans medically primitive learned that human doctors understood something fundamental about preserving life that transcended technological sophistication. The final victory against the Vex came not through massive military battles but through a coordinated galactic effort. Human intelligence identified Vex supply routes. Valorian warriors destroyed those routes. Zorvathan engineers created defensive systems that made Vex expansion impossible. Krasik strategists helped coordinate the final offensive. The Vex, cut off and surrounded, sued for peace rather than face certain destruction. But the most shocking moment came when the Vex request for peace terms arrived. They asked, specifically, to negotiate with human representatives. They said they would not negotiate with any species except humanity because they had learned through bitter experience that humans kept their word, honored agreements, and demonstrated mercy when they could have chosen vengeance. Jake Morrison personally led the peace negotiations. What emerged was surprising. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender or harsh punishments, Jake negotiated a peace treaty that gave the Vex territory of their own in a remote sector. The treaty included provisions for cultural exchange, trade, and mutual defense against common threats. It was not the peace that the galaxy's ancient species would have negotiated. It was a human peace, a peace based on hope that former enemies could become partners. Months later, Jake Morrison stood on the surface of Earth, looking up at the stars. Lisa Park, who had become humanity's lead diplomatic representative and was now his partner in both life and work, stood beside him. They reflected on how far humanity had come in such a short time. The Galactic Council had arrived at Earth to honor humanity formally. Ships from 70 different species orbited above, a display of unity and respect that Earth's leaders had never imagined possible. Young alien cadets walked through Earth's streets, learning human history and culture. Human soldiers trained beside Valorian warriors in facilities across the galaxy. The whispers through the galactic network had changed completely. No longer did alien species fear meeting humanity. They hoped that humanity would be their ally. The phrase Special Forces, once referring to a small military unit, had become synonymous with humanity itself. When other species spoke of humans, they spoke with mixture of respect, admiration, and trust. Jake Morrison looked at Lisa Park and smiled. She smiled back, and in that moment, they both understood that the most significant victory was not military. It was the simple truth that humanity had transformed not just galactic warfare, but galactic civilization itself. They had taught the ancient galaxy that strength did not come from power or age or technology. Strength came from integrity, from the willingness to protect the vulnerable, and from the belief that all conscious beings possessed value worth defending. As Earth rotated beneath them, revealing oceans and mountains and cities full of life, Jake knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity's story in the galaxy was still being written. But the first chapter had shown the universe one essential truth. They had called humans special forces and prayed never to meet them, never understanding that special forces did not mean dangerous warriors. It meant soldiers who would stand against darkness so others could live in light, who would sacrifice so others could thrive, and who would hold to their values even when power and vengeance seemed justified. That was what made humans truly special, and the galaxy would never be the same.